And I think what that does in thinking that through is it just brings that anxiety down, because anxiety is all about uncertainty and about things that we can't control. And while we can't control those things, just by thinking through and making some plans and having like a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and even just talking through and anticipating how that will feel and how we'll respond to that, that's a really productive way of helping kids process and work through those emotions.
Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. Here on the podcast, I share my experiences raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 16 to 26 and working with thousands more as a summer camp director over the past 3 decades. I'm the author of Happy Campers, and I frequently do workshops with parents, teachers, and summer camp professionals about social skills, connection, and happiness, topics I researched extensively for my master's in psychology. If you want tools for raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults, you've come to the right place. Hey, Sunshine Parenting listeners. Welcome to episode 151, which is first being released on Friday, August 7th, 2020. This week's One Simple Thing tip comes from part of a video series that I did a few years ago called One Simple Thing. And it is a practice that we do at camp called More of, Less of, Same of. So here's an excerpt from that video series, and I'll link in the show notes to the entire series if you want to see the rest of those videos. We do something called More of, Less of, Same of. And we do this with our leadership staff a couple times during the summer. We just get a big flip chart and we make 3 columns, more of, less of, same of. And we just start a brainstorm and just start talking about what do we want to do more of? What do we want to do the same of? So what's going well? And what do we want to do less of? And I have periodically done this just for myself, where I've made a list of things I want to do more of, or the same of, or less of. And I think it's a great way to it's a great way to kind of organize your reflection about how things are going. So I think it really works both as an individual or with your family. And perhaps if you wanted to, and if you think that it would be enjoyable for your family, you could actually do a kind of more of, less of, same of for your summer. And so that you end the summer on a really positive note, you can talk about, hey, what do we want to do more of in these last couple weeks of summer? What are some things that would be really fun to do? And just maybe brainstorm and get some ideas. And then you could also talk about what has been really fun this summer? What do we want to keep doing as the summer ends? And then what do we want to do less of? So perhaps there's something that hasn't been as enjoyable or isn't leading to as much happiness. So maybe you want to put something on the list for less of too. My guest today on the podcast is Dr. Nicole Beurkens. She has a unique combination of being a clinical psychologist, a nutritionist, and a special education teacher. Dr. Nicole has almost 20 years of experience supporting children, young adults, and families. She has specialized expertise in evaluating and treating a wide range of developmental and mental health concerns, including autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, learning disabilities, anxiety, bipolar disorder, behavioral disorders, brain injury, and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Dr. Nicole holds a doctorate in clinical psychology, a master's in nutrition and integrative health, and a master's in special education, and she's trained in numerous specialty areas. In our conversation, I specifically asked Dr. Nicole to share her ideas for how we can best cope with our families and our children during this very uncertain time, and specifically around the uncertainty about school. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dr. Nicole Beurkens this week on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Nicole Beurkens.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So we talked a couple weeks ago. I had the privilege of coming on your podcast, and we just had such a good chat that I was like, we got to chat again. So here we are. It is August 2020. And why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about the work you do and where you are?
Sure. So I'm in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area, and I am a clinical psychologist specializing in children and young adults. Also am board certified in nutrition and have a background in special education. So I bring those three pieces together in the work that I do in my private practice with families and children and young adults. I have a bunch of wonderful colleagues who work with me here at our clinic. I'm also a mom of 4, so I have that piece too of living the stuff that I am teaching and talking to parents about on a daily basis. My kids are 14, 16, 18, and 20 currently, so I'll have a 9th grader, 11th grader, college freshman, college junior this year. And in my spare time, have a podcast and some other things that I do, but I'm just really passionate about empowering families, empowering parents with information about how they can best support the development and the mental health and just the overall functioning of their kids. That's really what I'm about.
Which is why the timing of having you on is so perfect, because throughout this time, people have been kind of having extra anxiety about their kids and what's happening and everything else. But this month in particular, and as we move into the fall and see that things haven't really changed much and we're kind of going to be doing a lot more remote or distance learning. What are you seeing from your families? What are their biggest concerns right now or their issues?
Boy, none of us thought we'd still be here at this point, right? And I think that's what I'm hearing resoundingly from families across the board is, okay, back in March, April, it was like, all right, we can do this. This is a short-term thing. We're going to get through the end of the year. Then summer rolled around. Summer has looked different, certainly for the vast majority of kids and families. But I think now with anticipating a new school year and we're still in this pandemic and this really unusual situation, and parents and kids are now facing starting a year in a really different way, and just the uncertainty of that is generating a lot of anxiety and a lot of distress for kids, but I would say even more so for parents. I get asked all the time, what do we do for the kids? What do we do for the kids? And the reality of it is it's really how we're dealing with it as parents that sets the tone for how our kids deal with it. And we can certainly talk more about that. But I think that's across the board what I'm seeing in clinical practice and just out there in the world is parents really feeling like, okay, this is still going on. We've got massive uncertainty. How do we balance all of this? And how do we help our kids navigate what's happening here?
Oh my gosh, I agree. That's what I'm kind of seeing too. I think it's just sort of like the rest of life. Our kids really, they kind of learn more from what they see us doing and what we're modeling. And so, when we want kids to be comfortable and thriving, we need to show them what that looks like. And that's hard during a time like this because there are so many stresses, and adults have financial stresses and job issues, and then trying to do your job with kids. So there's just so much going on. So what are some of kind of your favorite strategies that you're sharing with people to try to just, get through this time?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to realize exactly what we're talking about, that the tone that we set as adults, as parents, really makes the most difference. If we're able to manage our own emotions and behaviors around this in healthier ways, that really goes a long way to helping kids do that because they model off of us. And that's whether they're infants or whether they are teenagers. They gauge what's going on in the world and how distressed or comfortable they should be based on what they see us doing, saying, the expressions even on our face, how we're navigating things. So more so even as a first step than doing something directly with kids, we need to figure out how to keep ourselves more stable and more regulated. And that certainly can be, easier said than done right now with all of the uncertainty and stressors. But parents, we need to find some time to ground ourselves and to help ourselves through the feelings and the things that are going on for us. And one of the things that I think has been really impactful for parents to hear me say throughout this is, you do not have to be doing things with your kids 24/7, even though they're at home. So one of the first objections that I get from parents when they're like, well, okay, self-care, taking time for myself, regulating myself. Yeah, right. My kids are home all the time. But here's the thing to remember. You don't need to be doing things with them all the time. A lot of parents, I find, especially of, younger through maybe elementary age kids, feel like if their kids are around all the time, they need to be a cruise ship director. They need to be entertaining them and doing Pinterest-worthy projects and meaningful things. And, I don't know about you, but as a mom of 4, I had plenty of times when my kids were younger, and even now when it's like, go do your own thing. I am not here today to entertain you all day. And in fact, it's super healthy and important for kids to have time when an adult is not structuring or generating and initiating activities. So moms and dads, please realize you can step back and take some time to do the work catch up that you need to do, to sit down with a book and a cup of tea for a few minutes if that is soothing to you, to go out and take that walk, to do the things that help keep you healthy. Your kids can go navigate that time by themselves. And if that looks like them sitting or lying in their room, bemoaning the fact that no one is entertaining them during that time, that's okay too, because it's really good for kids to be bored and to learn how to experience that and manage through that. And ultimately what happens is they start to find things to do. And that's, really where an increase in creativity and self-generated activity and initiative comes from, is when we allow them to have times where they have to figure it out either independently or with their siblings. So I think that's a first thing to really hold on to, is figure out what it looks like to take care of yourself, at least enough where you can be more grounded and more at peace with your own emotions, with your own behaviors. And to do that, you realize you don't have to be entertaining your kids 24/7.
I think that's such a good point, because I think that sort of shifted. That's one of the things with sort of the over-parenting era, was also this sort of managing every minute. And I've never done that. I mean, we always use the term independent playtime. Time for some independent playtime. And then we usually had some room, either a kid's bedroom or some place where, we'd have a whiteboard and the toys. And so even when they were pretty little, like when they're past the point where they're putting things in their mouth, if you have like a safe room, for them to play in, our kids did a lot of just independent playtime, playing together or playing school on the whiteboard, whatever they were doing. But those are their best memories anyway.
Absolutely.
But I do think that's kind of gotten lost. I think part of it is that when both parents work outside the home, I think what they're used to is when the time that they are home, maybe it's like dinner time or whatever, it's been very concentrated family time. So I think this shift when your kids are always there, maybe that's an issue that people think, oh, it's supposed to always be this like full on we're family time now or whatever. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. But what about, and I will just say, because I know that I'm hearing this a lot from parents, what about the issue of kids who, when you're not kind of orchestrating, they're just on their screens?
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that? Like, what's the solution with that situation?
So screens do not always have to be an option for kids, and shouldn't always be an option for kids. And in fact, they should have times during the day when they're not options and there's other things they need to do. So if a parent's saying to me, if I'm not entertaining them, they'll just go on their screens. And the solution to that is to have times and spaces during the day where I'm not entertaining you and your devices aren't an option either. And that is so important for kids' cognitive development, for their social and emotional development, for their physical health, to be taking breaks from that. But it's so true that very often now kids just, their default, if no one is engaging them in something, is just passive, screen time kinds of things. And so we need to be intentional about setting times and spaces where that's not happening. And here's the secret to that: 100% expect they will not like that. And that is okay. It is totally okay. I know that this is not going to make you feel happy, and I'm okay with that because I know that this is good for you. And if you need to have some time in your room to just work through that for yourself and be unhappy and, be upset with me about it, that's totally okay. I'm going to be over here doing my thing. And give them the opportunity to work through that and to learn how to cope and manage without devices as a distractor. That's a really key thing. And it's something I'm seeing in a lot of older teens and young adults now in my practice, that they have not learned how to tolerate uncomfortable feelings, how to be with themselves and their own thoughts, because their generation has just grown up sort of defaulting to using passive scrolling through social media, or, doing things online and on their devices as a way to kind of numb that. And while that works in the short term, it is not a good long-term strategy, and it's not a strategy for helping kids grow up to be more resilient, to be emotionally and behaviorally regulated. So when we can start to give them those opportunities now at a younger age, while they're still with us in our homes, even though it's not the most pleasant thing to deal with them, it is really important to do that. And it's important for us to set a model for that too. And this goes back to our piece of it, right? That if we're saying this isn't healthy for you to be glued to these devices all the time, then we need to be a model of that healthy behavior of not being glued to our devices all the time. And I completely get that, especially with parents working at home now, you may be on the computer for many hours a day for work-related things. But to even be intentional about things like device-free meal times, to be intentional about when I am doing something with you, playing a game, taking a walk, doing some kind of play with you, I don't have my devices there. To be intentional about your children seeing you, doing activities and things where you're taking a break from the devices, where they're not part of the picture, seeing you doing things for yourself to relax and engage in self-care without resorting to devices. Those are really important models. And I think those are far more powerful than the things that we tell them about what's healthy and appropriate with devices.
So I want to hear what's happening in your house right now. So you have, I think especially because you have two that are technically, they're supposed to be starting new things. And I think that, I know it's hard for everybody, but to me, when I hear about, I don't have any kids who are at that transition, they're not in a transition year. I have, one going into his junior year of high school, and then a sophomore in college, senior in college, and then two adults who are teachers who are going back to, just learning over the past few weeks that they're going to be doing distance teaching. Yeah. So that's kind of my, my family situation. But your kids, you have two who were at these really critical, so what are you doing with them or for them to sort of help them navigate just doing a new thing, but not the way they expected?
Well, not the way they expected. And not only that, but not knowing what's coming, right? As I'm saying to parents, flexibility, super important, because just because we may have a plan right now of how the school year is going to start doesn't mean that 3 weeks from now that's going to look the same, or 3 months from now. So I'm really trying to embed in kids and adults this idea of we have to be flexible. This is an opportunity to build that flexibility muscle. And that's really how I'm approaching it with my kids. My son, my second son, who is going to be a freshman in college, he was a senior last spring and lost out on all of those key milestone moments that you have as a senior in high school, and now starting college in the midst of this. Now, my two boys who are in college have a better situation, I think, than a lot of kids. They're going to small schools. Their schools are starting up for the most part in person. They are going to be able to live on campus. And I do think what I'm hearing across the board from a lot of my young adult patients and families of teenagers is that their freshmen or their first year students in colleges are bending over backwards to have them live on campus, to give them as much of the experience as they can, depending on what the regulations in the state are right now. And, that's the thing. We've had conversations with the kids about, okay, let's think about all the possible scenarios. And let's just kind of think through some plans for that. And I think that's really helpful strategy for parents and kids to be doing, especially if you have kids at those milestone, kinds of situations. All right, well, here's what we know right now. Let's think through how that might go. Let's think about what we might do if the state changes the rules and your college has to shut down and you come home. What will that look like? And, what will the plan be for that? Or for my high schoolers, okay, you're going to start online for the first 9 weeks. And then what happens if the rest of the year goes online? How will that feel? How will we navigate that? And I think what that does in thinking that through is it just brings that anxiety down, because anxiety is all about uncertainty and about things that we can't control. And while we can't control those things, just by thinking through and making some plans and having like a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and even just talking through and anticipating how that will feel and how we'll respond to that, that's a really productive way of helping kids process and work through those emotions, and to know that, okay, I've got something to grab onto here, that if things do suddenly change, I kind of have a plan in my mind of how that might go. And I think that's a really helpful strategy, whether you're dealing with a kindergartner or a middle schooler or a college age student, to just start having those conversations. And it's helpful for the parents too, because it helps us think through contingency plans, especially for families where your work situation, childcare situation, like all of that can just be totally uprooted in a moment. To think through contingency plans, to get your support system in place. Hopefully you won't need to use them, but if you do, you've got some of those things in place and you've had some of those conversations, and that can help ground us and help us feel more secure in the midst of the uncertainty too.
I like that. So a couple of things that I've really taken away, the flexibility piece. I think all of us need to be flexible, and that's whatever, in workplaces, in families, in schools, teachers, everyone, because like you said, everyone's kind of doing the best they can. And these schools and larger institutions, I know, speaking from our perspective, I run a summer camp and we were all through the spring. I mean, we were looking at all the different things that we could do, tweaks we could make. How can we make this happen? And in the end, we weren't able to meet. And we ended up doing an online program, and it was very small. And oh my gosh, it was really great for the kids who participated and the counselors. And they actually said afterwards that they felt the connection, even though it was like, they met, it was their same group with their counselors meeting 3 times a week. And it was really heartwarming to me to, first of all, see how resilient kids are, that even when they couldn't come to camp and they did this thing, and same with the counselors, these young adult counselors were so fun. They even did skits on Zoom.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
They had we had a skit night at the end of the session. And I'm just I was blown away that oftentimes I think actually kids and their creativity is way exceeds what adults can think of. So I bet, if we give kids and say, hey, you know what, we're going to be flexible. Let's try to make the best of this. How can you make this fun? What can we do? I bet we can, I know we can get through this, but I also think for me, I've been just telling my kids, we have today. What can we do today to make?
Absolutely.
Because I am a normal, by nature, I'm a full planner. I've got my planner. I love having my goals and, all this stuff. And I have found myself basically just throwing my hands up during this whole thing, not able to run my business, not, all these things, but I'm feeling like the only option, I can feel stressed about it and be constantly worried, or I can just say, hey, I've got some extra time with my family. We've had many, many family dinners that we wouldn't have had normally. So kind of try to live in the moment a little more. And I know that, we've all been talking about mindfulness and how important that is, but it's almost like we're being forced now to be aware and do better with what is going on inside of us. I think, I don't know, when you slow down, all the stuff comes up. So I feel like, I don't know if you're seeing that too, that relational issues and underlying things under stress get exacerbated, right?
Right. Well, a lot of our typical coping strategies have been taken away because a lot of how, at least in the United States, a lot of the default coping mode is to stay busy. To have lots to do, lots of things to do individually, with our partners, with our kids. We're busy, 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 busy. And when all of that goes away, we're left to, as you said, sit with the feelings and the relationships and not have those default coping modes. And while that's a great thing, it's also a hard thing. And I think people are feeling sort of the restlessness of that now, okay, we've been doing this for a while. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for many parents and kids. And there's this general sort of underlying sense now of, can we just get back to a little bit of, the normal things, especially for our older kids who are in that preteen, teen, young adult phase of their development where social connection and relationships is such a pivotal part of their growth and development right now. And yes, there are creative ways to do that. And you're absolutely right that kids are amazingly resilient. And I've been really impressed across the board, even with our more significantly impaired patients or patients with more significant mental illness issues, how well they have done in the midst of all of this. But it is feeling long now. And so to stay focused on what can the positives of this be? Okay, so many people, especially like I know you're like in California, kids now are finding out, wow, nobody, like things are shutting down again, right? And so to try to focus on, okay, what are the silver linings here? Or what are some of the benefits? You know, even we've been having conversations in our house like, well, if school shuts down, if you're not able to live in the dorm, okay, there's a money savings piece with that. You know, I mean, looking at even those pieces of where can we find some things to grab onto and say, okay, nothing that's going to happen here is all bad. And to try to find those silver linings, I think that is an important thing.
Sure. So what, so in Michigan, our high schools, you said 9 weeks, they're saying they're going to start online?
Well, it's really, each district is making their own decisions. So we found out for my 11th grader, he goes to a very large urban district. They have decided to do the first 9 weeks online and evaluate, as they go, hoping to open then and do more in person once the first 9 weeks is done. My daughter's school is an international online school anyway, so the hybrid portions of that are not happening yet, hopefully as the semester goes along, but they already do the online instruction. We've got districts here locally to my clinic who are going to try to open. Every district that I'm aware of in our area is offering parents the option of 100% virtual if that is what's most comfortable for them or what works best for them. And honestly, in the conversations I'm having with families at my clinic, there is a certain segment of people who are choosing that option, not so much out of fear of the virus or illness, but more out of the considerations for the family unit and work of needing to know that there is a consistent plan, that if they choose the 100% online option, they can make a plan then for their childcare needs. They can make a plan for their work, and that plan won't need to change. And for some families, that has absolutely been the right option because of their various circumstances, including some kids with more significant special needs, just to be able to have the consistency of that and not potentially be bounced back and forth on a day's notice. And that's why I'm really encouraging families to think about making these kinds of decisions around what is in the best interest of your family. There is no right or wrong with this. And unfortunately, it's become really polarizing. Like this entire thing has become so, like, that's a whole nother conversation. But as families and as parents, we can support each other and realize that there is no right or wrong. There are options, and you need to look at what is in the best interest of your family's health, wellness, well-being, what's going to work for you, and that's going to be the right option for you. And I think that's important because so many parents are saying, I don't want to make the wrong choice. And I'm like, well, good news. There isn't a right or a wrong decision to make here as long as you're keeping your family's health and well-being and stability at the forefront of your decision-making process. You're not going to make a wrong decision. And guess what? If you get partway into it and you go, oh my goodness, this is not working, there's options. You can figure out something different. You're not stuck with it. So I think that's a really important overarching thing for parents to keep in mind, and maybe helps take some of that burden and that pressure off, along with remembering that kids are incredibly resilient. If this entire school year ends up being a total mess, again, you know what? Kids will be okay. They really will. They really will. And how we handle that mess as adults will pave the way for them handling that. But just for parents to not feel so much pressure of every single thing is sort of a life or death, issue, it really isn't.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. I feel so much better already. And it reminds me, I think that's true not during the pandemic as well.
Yeah,
Sometimes we overthink
100%.
things and think that something is going to change, and like you said, you can pivot if it seems like it's not working. So this has been such a great conversation, very encouraging. I hope parents leave just feeling reassured that, like you said, focus on what is best for your child in this moment,
Yep.
given the options you have now, and then you can reassess as time goes on, and it's not going to be, life or death at this point.
Yeah.
So where can people find you and your amazing work? And I'll put links as well, but just tell a little bit about kind of some of the resources or things that you especially want to make sure let my listeners know about.
Sure. Thank you so much. So my website, where I house tons of videos and blog posts and resources and things for parents, is drbeurkens.com. So drbeurkens.com, drbeurkens.com. All kinds of things there. There's a 7-day challenge that parents can sign up for, all kinds of free resources. You'll also find my podcast there, The Better Behavior Show. One of my favorite things that I get to do is do those interviews, and we have just hundreds of thousands of people who love those episodes, and lots of different topics there. And that's on my website as well, or you can find it on all the podcast players, The Better Behavior Show. And then my most recent book for parents is called Life Will Get Better. You can find that on Amazon, on my website as well. And that's really geared towards parents of kids with attention, anxiety, mood, or behavior kinds of issues, really giving concrete strategies in a natural, holistic way for how to address those kinds of needs in kids. So that's those things. And then my clinic is horizonsdrc.com, where we work with, do evaluation and treatment for families in Michigan and throughout the country and around the world. So that's another resource that people can check out as well.
Oh, that's amazing. So you can even do remote things. So if people wanted to, wow, that's incredible. Well, I have so enjoyed our conversation, and I'm going to get your book, the one you just mentioned. Tell me again the name of it. That's the one I want to read.
Yes. Life Will Get Better.
Yes. So that's the one I think I want to read next, and then have you on again to talk about that. Best of luck to you and your family as you start this new school year. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing to support families during this challenging time.
Thank you so much.
My favorite this week is a book I read a few years ago called The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. I was reminded about the power of moments last week when we did a special surprise road trip to celebrate some of our campers who had participated in an online program we were offering and were celebrating milestone years at my camp. We have a long-time tradition of giving campers a 5-year blanket at the final campfire of their 5th summer at camp. And we had the opportunity to contact the parents and arrange to give these campers their blankets outside in their front yards. And it was such a fun trip. I'm going to put the link to the video in the show notes this week so you can see it. But definitely has been the highlight of my summer, and I know it was just so much fun creating those special memories for campers. So I think that I just would really love to encourage you to check out The Power of Moments, the book. And there's also an audio excerpt that is available for free, and I'm putting it in the show notes so you can check that out as well. So my favorite for this week is The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. As always, you can find notes, links, and other resources related to today's conversation by visiting my website at sunshine-parenting.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for my email list so that you don't miss out on any of the great resources I have available for raising thriving kids. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate you sharing it with a friend. Please take a moment to give Sunshine Parenting a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's end with a quote from my book, Happy Campers. Creating a close and connected family culture that promotes positive, lifelong relationships is the most important thing we can do for our children. Warm and supportive parent-child relationships, a sense of being loved, and help and support from family members serve as protective factors and increase children's resilience and their ability to face many of life's inevitable challenges. I'm Audrey Monkey. Thank you for joining me for the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. Join me again next week for more conversations about raising kids who become thriving adults.